Podcasting to you from the beautiful Pacific Northwest, I'm your host, Brad Johnson. Welcome to The Theory of Wine. In today's podcast, we delve into a cornucopia of wine and chat with wine expert Lauren Cannon about her wine life, holidays, and favorite picks. Plus, we meet Caitlin Hodges of sipsandtips.com and talk wine, food, and travel. It's the third week of November, friends, and that means new wines and yummy food coming your way. Stick around. My guest, Lauren Cannon, is the owner of The Secret Cellar, an Eastern Iowa wine shop, a wine competition judge, wine educator, and wine industry consultant, and is the narrator of the documentary film Wine Diamonds Uncorking America's Heartland. As a small-town Iowa girl, Lauren had no idea one day she'd be calling the wine industry her career and passion. After graduating the University of Iowa, Lauren moved to Scottsdale, Arizona, and started working in the food and beverage department at the Hyatt Regency Scottsdale. It was while she was working on a winemaker dinner with Jack Cakebread that put her over the edge, infatuation with wine. She knew from that moment on that wine would always be part of her life somehow. Lauren Cannon, welcome to The Theory of Wine.
Thanks, Brad. I'm happy to be here with you tonight.
I'm so happy to have you. We have a history together. We've known each other for probably close to a decade now.
Yes.
Full disclosure, you are the narrator of the documentary film that me and the team put together. And so we have a long history. I know you know wine. You've got a shop. You know wine from lots of different directions. So I want to...
Learning.
Yeah, well, that's the fun part, right?
Right, exactly.
So talk about learning. Talk about how did you find your way to this place that you are right now? Not Mexico, because we were talking. She's in Mexico, by the way. Yeah, shh, don't tell anybody. But how did you find your way into the world of wine?
Do you know, after, like you said, I started working for the Hyatt Regency in Gainey Ranch in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I didn't really know or understand wine growing up. But once I got the job in the food and beverage department there, the training was amazing. And we got to meet the winemakers. They'd come to the hotel and do wine dinners. And at that point, I was a server, still kind of figuring out how to work wine into the world. And the winemaker dinner with Jack Cakebread. And there was a moment where there were some of the guests eating some of the food and tasting some of the wine. And one of the women nudged her husband. She's like, I didn't think I liked wine, but this really makes sense. And I was like, what is happening? So it just kind of evolved from there. And afterwards, luckily I was able to stay around and talk with the winemaker and learn more about, wine and food pairing and how that makes sense. So it just became fascinating to me. I'm like, this is a new subject I know nothing about. Right. So there it is. So
that's Arizona. This is post college degree.
Post undergrad, yes. Okay.
And you spent how much time did you spend down in Arizona doing that?
Oh gosh, about 8 years down there. And it just evolved and rolled from there. I mean, luckily the training program through the Hyatt was very good, but also the winemaker dinners were very plentiful. So I would always volunteer to work those so I could stick around and talk with the winemakers, which was a world totally outside of anything that I understood growing up in Iowa. And they would be very generous with their time and information and talking about winemaking. And I was like, my mind was blown. I'm like, I want to know more. Tell me more. So it just kind of snowballed from there.
So it snowballed, you got fascinated by wine. So what was the next step after that to I know you have a wine shop, and you're judging wine. So how did those next steps take place?
Again, the journey is just so bizarre. A lot of people have wine families and stories about how they knew it was in their blood and knew that it would be part of their lives. And that wasn't the case for me at all. As a matter of fact, my whole family are whiskey drinkers pretty much, except for me now and my brother. I've converted. But most of my family drinks whiskey. And I knew that after my experience in food and beverage at the Hyatt, that it would always be part of my life. And I traveled around. I lived in Chicago for a while, and that was really great because the wine industry is very plentiful and access to really amazing wines there. I went overseas for a while and then came back home and was just inspired. I wanted to bring some of what I'd learned in other places back to my hometown, which is a very, very small town, very small town of 500 people. And I just said, I think I'm going to maybe bring a little bit of education and a little bit of some new passion for me and share it with my community and see how they respond and take a risk. And people said, you're crazy. And here I am 14 years later. It's worked out really well. The community is very supportive. There's lots of local wineries popping up. And so we're able to kind of, bridge that mystery between grape growing, wine making, wine tasting, wine and food pairing. Like all of it is making the connection now. So it's really a great time to be involved. I'm so grateful.
So you said a small town. It's a very small town, and you're nestled between Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and Iowa City, which is probably 20 minutes from both towns, I'm guessing, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Just off I-380, and Cedar Ridge Winery is just across the freeway, a couple miles away, and. So you started your business at what time did you do that? How long ago?
That was in 2004. In December of 2004. I actually had the inspiration to open my business in September of 2004 and open doors in December of 2004.
Wow, that's fast.
It was really fast. It was. And so many people said, you're crazy. Like, wine isn't going to last in the Midwest. Like, we're kind of booze and beer people, but we're not wine people. But that has changed, which is so great. And then a few years after I opened, a friend of mine said, hey, I saw this advertisement to be a wine judge. You can go to Des Moines and take this test to become a wine judge.
Right.
So it's all, it's just all perfect timing, perfect people, perfect moments, meeting the right people that are supportive and excited about the wine industry too. So that's been great. And the community, again, has been so supportive. And I've watched some of my customers start with maybe some I don't want to say entry level wines, but maybe some wines that are more accessible to the palate to move through different types of wine. So now they're drinking a range depending on the occasion and the food that they're having. So it's
I had Mark Substick on the show recently, and he mentioned the same thing about the entry-level wines. And he I think it's like you. It's like people are interested in wine, and they're not quite sure how to approach it because it can be pretty daunting. And so if I'm new to the wine world, I have an interest, and maybe I've had a bad experience with something that's like really pretty big and bold, and I'm not quite sure it's really for me. How would you kind of guide me into the wine world in kind of a gentle sort of way?
Absolutely. Well, the great part is there are wines that to satisfy a wide variety of palates and also wines for a variety of occasions. Right. And one really fantastic thing that I developed since I opened my shop is wine classes for people that really I'm a beginner, I want to understand it. Right. I might not enjoy it, but I want you to walk me through like why it is what it is and where it came from and the region and the style. And really grateful because a lot of those people have continued to be customers of my shop, but they start with something that's more familiar with their palate, like maybe something a little bit sweeter, maybe something that almost tastes like, for me, the first thing that I ever knew that was wine-ish was a wine cooler.
Right, wine-ish.
When I was in college, mom and dad, it wasn't me, but something that's more familiar with the palate. And then you start to understand how it pairs up with different things. And so a lot of times I'll sample it out with different food flavors, maybe some cheese, maybe something sweet, maybe something bitter, so that the palate can understand like where it finds its home. Right. And I will say what's really cool is that even in the classes that I teach where maybe there's a beginning wine drinker and maybe someone that has enjoyed, for 20 years in their life, there's a moment where, this makes sense. Like, I don't drink sweet wine, but I break out, some crazy, sweet shortbread cookies with a local made wine that has a sugar level that meets it and makes sense. Right. And they say, what? I never knew I liked sweet wine. Like, don't tell anyone. But it's really cool.
That is really cool. I think that's amazing. I'm just kind of going back about how people's perceptions of local wines. And, I was at the conference, a wine writers conference in Walla Walla recently. And we're still, even in places like Washington has a quite established wine industry, they're still having difficulties getting people to try the wines that we grow here. Coming from Iowa, it's the same problem. It's like there's so many great wines that are happening really close to home. And how do you bridge that maybe preconception people have about what's good and what's okay to like and the local stuff?
Yes, I agree with you when you say what's okay to like, because what is okay is a personal experience. Right. And what is good to you is good to you. The challenge, I think, with a lot of people that drink wine is it's such a daunting subject that they take advice from other people that say this is what you should like or this is what's good. I mean, look at what happened with the movie Sideways. And after that movie came out and Paul Giamatti was like, I'm not drinking Merlot. Do you know what happened to Merlot wine sales?
Absolutely.
Yes, Merlot is delicious.
Yep.
And then what happened with Pinot Noir after that movie? Sales went up. So a lot of it comes from maybe people listening to experts or media or, whoever they, are thinking knows something about wine to try and tell them what their palate likes.
Absolutely.
And that's crazy because it's like telling someone you need to like sushi. And if your palate doesn't like it, so in my classes, I will teach, maybe I'll introduce 4 different wines that people understand and have experience with. And then if I'm trying to bridge the gap between local wines, I'll blind taste, actually. I'll put it in a bag or put it in a sock, and I'll have them taste that wine. And maybe I'll break it out with something like a shortbread cookie that's really sweet or whatever else that it may accompany that makes sense.
Right.
And I'll, just have their own response. And you'll see people that maybe previously would be like, I would never like that. Like, this tastes really good together. It makes sense right now. Yes, that's the moment where this wine makes sense. It has a home. It belongs in this moment of enjoying with this particular food or these particular sweets or this particular fruit.
Absolutely. It's heartwarming to hear you say that. It's heartwarming to have been on the fringes of the Mid-America Wine Competition. And as a wine student working with Paul Gospodarczyk back when he had the program there at DMAC, and, watching you guys work with Doug Frost, Bob Foster, Dale Vroom, and other folks that are there. These are world-class folks that really, really know wine. And they're in Iowa judging a competition of wines that are new to the world that most people don't even know about. And so what takeaways do you have from those experiences? Because I think that's incredibly fascinating.
It is fascinating. And I think in your movie Wine Diamonds, you really present it well by interviewing people that are top-notch in the industry. I mean, it's not just, little people like me from small town Shueyville. It is people like Doug Frost and Bob Foster saying, you know what? There's a future to this. It would be like discrediting California wines before the Judgment of Paris.
Absolutely.
You have no idea what this future holds. And once the winemakers decide the treatment, the yeast strain, like all of those different things for local Midwestern grapes, I feel like it has a very, very promising future.
Absolutely. So we are getting, well, I guess we're coming up on the third Thursday of November. And
we are.
If there are probably folks that have never heard about this, but maybe have kind of an idea. Can you tell us about this Beaujolais Nouveau?
Beaujolais Nouveau? I'm French. Do I say it right?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, it's so fun. I mean, anytime you have a holiday that's centered around tradition, and pretty much that's what Beaujolais Nouveau is for, tradition. So we're talking about French winemaking tradition. And if you are a wine drinker, then France is a region to pay attention to because they've been making wine a very, very, very long time. And they know what to do with their grapes and how to grow their grapes and how to harvest their grapes. And so Beaujolais Nouveau is a fun holiday that is centered around pretty much the first wines of the season. So many winemakers, well, not many winemakers, I guess, do this, but they produce what they call young wine. So Beaujolais Nouveau, meaning Beaujolais new wine.
Right.
They release these wines, they harvest the grapes, and as early as the last week of August, which actually happened this year, it was a very early harvest. The conditions were beautiful. And so they harvest the end of August, and then the wines are in the market in November. And the fun tradition, it's in Beaujolais, which is in the southern region of Burgundy, especially in the town Lyon. The winemakers will, as a celebration to the first wines of this year's harvest, roll the barrels down the street and open them up and enjoy them with all of the community. And they have a big party and a celebration. It's a lot of fun. Luckily, we have availability for export for Beaujolais Nouveau. So pretty much we're kind of tagging on to France and their fun party time, because why don't Americans party when other people party around the world?
Absolutely. It's the third Thursday in November.
Yes. So Beaujolais Nouveau is the third Thursday in November, and there are actually since 1985 laws in which it cannot be released or a bottle popped until 12:01 a.m. on the third Thursday in November. And this wine is made from the Gamay grape. It is a very fresh and lively and festive wine. It isn't a serious wine. If some of you are thinking like, oh, I really don't like to drink red wine, this would be a great introductory level red wine for you because it's young, it's fresh, there aren't a lot of tannins, which is the part that makes the wine bitter.
Right.
It's very approachable, kind of smells like candied fruit a little bit, maybe some cherries and strawberries. So a lot of people like to have that Beaujolais Nouveau because it's kind of a playful, fun, festive way to say, hey, the new season, the new harvest of grapes, and here it is, and here was, what it has for you to play with and party with, I guess.
It sounds like a fun wine, right? It doesn't take itself too serious, and I guess if we're rolling barrels down the street,
Right. Who would do that?
Right.
But it's really fun. It's actually, the Gamay grape is a cousin of the Pinot Noir. So for those of you that like Pinot Noir and understand it is also very, delicate and not super high in tannins, which is the bitter part.
Right.
It's very playful and just very easy to drink. It's not anything that you need absolutely to pair up with food. Even some people like to put a little chill on it like they do with Pinot Noir. So it's it's a holiday wine, and it's perfect because they have helped us here for our Thanksgiving celebration with a wine that pairs perfectly with turkey.
That's the next question, is how perfect this happens to roll out. Yeah, so it's, you're thinking turkey, you're thinking white wines, but here we're talking Beaujolais Nouveau. We got a nice, young, fruity, fun red wine. You toss them chill down a little bit. Do you have favorites for Thanksgiving? And what do you, I don't know what to do with Thanksgiving meal, Lauren. What do I do?
Yes. Oh, the pressure.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure.
Okay, take notes, everybody. Beaujolais Nouveau would be really a wonderful pairing wine if you're going to roast your turkey. And again, just like food and wine pairing rules, it depends on the seasonings that you use and the method that you use to make the food. But if you're having a traditional roasted turkey right in the oven, Beaujolais Nouveau is wonderful. It's light and playful. It's not too serious. It's fresh and lively. And Georges Duboeuf, who is one of the premier producers, so in the Beaujolais region where about a third of the grapes go towards Beaujolais Nouveau production, Georges Duboeuf is one of the premier producers and also has really had a fun time exporting a lot of his wines for around the globe celebration of the third Thursday in November, which is pretty fun. So that is definitely one of my top recommendations.
Awesome. So other favorites from around, you've been around the world, you taste these wines. What are you thinking? What else would be good picks? What else would you toss in the mix?
Well, being the cousin of the Gamay grape, Pinot Noir, I think would also be a really good pairing with Thanksgiving turkey if you're going to roast the turkey. Anything, if you want something a little bit more delicate style, then I would go north, Willamette, Oregon, Washington, those sort of growers that produce a really elegant style, very delicate and really, I want to say a softer expression.
Right.
I would go there. If you want something a little bit more robust or a little bit fruitier or something with a little bit of a, more backbone, then I would go, southern, maybe not Southern California, but South Napa, Sonoma, and even Mendocino, Central Coast. Some of those Pinots would be really yummy too.
Right.
The Burgundy region, famous for Pinot and the stylistic original founders of the Pinot style, would also be really delicious, I think. If you're going to go something local, let's say in Iowa, there's a really wonderful producer. Buchanan House Winery actually has a Pinot style Frontenac that it really stylistically I think would be delicious with roasted turkey.
So Buchanan, that's funny you mentioned Buchanan House because Randy Weaver's the winemaker, the owner of that place. And back in the day, a few of us created the Eastern Iowa Wine Club, and he was back when we were amateur winemakers, and he was one of the founding members of the group. And now he's got this whole by Tipton. And Randy makes great wines.
Yes.
So how cool is that?
I mean, if you're looking for something, that style, the Gamay, Pinot kind of family of things, I mean, that's where it rests on my shelf in the shop when people are looking for stylistically something that would fit right in that category. That's where that wine lies on the shelf.
So that's Buchanan House Winery. That's in Iowa, Tipton, Iowa. So make sure to make a plug in that when we blog post that accompanies this.
Absolutely.
Podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. It's delicious.
Any white wines you recommend for maybe we're talking a vegetarian Thanksgiving, maybe thinking a little bit outside the box?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a big fan of the bubble. And I love sparkling. I love sparkling wine. I love rosé and sparkling wine, which I'm, giving little nudges here and there to our local wine producers so they can. Would you make a sparkling wine for me?
Absolutely.
Right. Because I think they're delicious. So I think sparkling wine definitely is your go-to for, like you say, vegetarian or rosé too. And you don't have to go, when I say sparkling wine, a lot of people think, oh, I have to buy a champagne, and it's intimidating.
Absolutely.
Champagne can be really expensive, and you think, well, I might not like it.
Yeah.
But cava's from Spain. So CAVA cava is something that a lot of people locally don't understand or know about. But if you're looking for a sparkling that's approachable price point, where you're like, well, my family may or may not like it, you don't have to spend $50 or $60 on the bottle. You can get a really nice quality sparkling wine, cava, or a Prosecco from Italy. Also, yes, it would be really approachable, especially if your turkey's fried. That would be a perfect pairing for that too. But yeah, sparkling wine, I don't want to say you should drink it all the time, but it doesn't have to be a holiday. Sparkling wine is the best way to start any party.
I think I need to do a month-long or maybe a once a month podcast that talks about bubbly wine, because Invite me. Yes, because we are both on the same page here. And I think, Lucas McIntyre at the winery at Kirkwood.
Oh, goodness.
Oh my God.
Illinois Sparkling Company.
Yeah, Mark Wenzel over there in Illinois Sparkling Company. His wines are out of this world. Josie Boyle up in Dewdrop Wines up in Chankaska Creek Ranch Winery. Larry Mobby. Oh my God, there's so many great.
Yes.
And we're not even. We're just talking Midwest right now. Treveri Cellars here in Washington. Gloria Ferrar. There are so many good, affordable, tasty. Yeah, we'll just have to have a talk about.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll join you.
Sounds great.
I'll join you for that. Like this.
I think this is awesome. I'm so happy that you were able to hang out with us here today, Lauren.
Thank you.
Wrap this up and say thank you, and we would love to have you back again. Lauren Cannon is the owner of the Secret Cellar in Eastern Iowa Wine Shop, wine competition judge, wine industry consultant, and the narrator of a wonderful documentary film, to say so myself, Wine Diamonds and Corking America's Heartland. Want to know more about Lauren? Check out our website, secretcellarwines.com. That's secretcellarwines.com. She's located in Eastern Iowa between Cedar Rapids and Iowa City. And I will post links to our website and contact information on my theoryofwine.com blog. Lauren, it's been awesome having you here today.
Thank you so much, Brad. It's been an honor to be on your cast today and to be working with you on the film.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And congratulations again, Wine Spectator, featuring Wine Diamonds.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that.
It's just the beginning. It's the beginning.
It's the beginning. So thank you again, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you all. Keep drinking.
Hey, wine friends. Each week, The Theory of Wine will bring you interesting content from winemakers, wine growers, wine rebels, writers and bloggers, and serious wine nerds from around the world. Want to join us? Connect with us at theoryofwine.com, on Facebook, or Twitter. Cheers, friends. My guest, Caitlin Hodges, is a Southern California native and self-proclaimed foodie with a passion for travel, cooking, fine wine, and hoppy beer. Through her blog, Sips and Tips, Caitlin aims to showcase the unique relationship between culture, food, and drink and inspire readers to experience the world through that lens. Caitlin's passionate about featuring locally produced goods and small businesses and revealing the stories behind their craft. In her free time, you'll find Caitlin trying out new tasting rooms, developing recipes, or exploring the outdoors. Caitlin Hodges, welcome to The Theory of Wine.
Thank you for having me.
So, I'd like to start off the show like we met each other at the Wine Bloggers Conference in October in Walla Walla, Washington.
beautiful.
That's right.
And we met, I think it was like maybe Thursday night when everybody was kind of gathered around. And I jokingly say, I forgot, this happens to me periodically. I forgot to sip and spit. And I sipped. And it's like, by the time the night got over, I was like, oh my God, what did I do to myself?
Oh yeah.
It was an interesting time, and I met a lot of nice people like yourself. And what I want to do is circle back and kind of reconnect with the nice blogger folks and writer folks and wine influencers, whatever you want to call us. And you were so nice, and I read your blog, and I've been seeing your stuff, and I just want to kind of get to know more about you and share your story with the rest of the wine and food world.
Thank you.
Tell us, how did you get into writing, and kind of what brought you to this path?
It's funny. I've always been interested in food since I was a kid. I grew up watching Food Network in my free time and those sorts of things, and so that's always been a lingering passion. And that evolved into a passion for wine and beer and spirits and those sorts of things as I got older as well. But aside from that, I've also always sort of had an interest in creative writing. And so it seemed like a natural outlet to combine the two. And it kind of started as a challenge to myself, a New Year's resolution to come up with something to blog about,
Sure.
Write about. And it's kind of shaped over the past couple of years into what it is today. So I have a lot of fun with it. And it's just kind of my outlet, if you will.
Yeah. So when you tell people that you write a food or a wine or...
I kind of have come up with this little slogan, if you will, called travel, cooking, and what to sip along the way. And I think that kind of encapsulates my angle and what I like to talk about in how I view the world through the lenses of wine, food, drink, culture, how all of those intersect. So that's kind of my little publicity speech, if you will.
Nice. And you've been around the world. I saw your map of places that you've been. I'm curious, like, where's some favorite places that you've been?
Oh gosh. I've been to a very limited part of the world. I've got a long way to go still, but I've explored quite a bit of Europe. I think Germany is definitely a highlight for me. I absolutely love that. We did a 10-day road trip through Germany and Austria, and the culture there and the people, they were just fantastic. So that's definitely one that stands out.
Yeah. Favorite beers, favorite wines you found over there?
We actually did a beer tour over there. I have a whole post about it.
Yeah.
But we really learned how to spot the beer gardens where the locals are at, as opposed to Hofbrauhaus where all the tourists are at. And so just experiencing that, I think, was a highlight for me personally. And there's a small town called Mittenwald that we visited. And we actually went up to the top of the Alps while we were there.
Okay.
And up there they had this bar where you could have a lager that was made just down the mountain in Mittenwald. So that was pretty magical. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. You said there's a place where the locals go and the place where the tourists go. How do you determine which is which?
So typically the more tucked away, the better. Okay. The lack of signage is always a good, first step. Right. I think one thing that my husband and I have both learned as we've traveled is to really try and get to know the locals and take their advice. And so we make an effort to ask them, where do you go? And where do you suggest we explore? And they'll usually point you in the right direction and tell you the places to avoid too, because they're tourist traps. Right. So that's some of the resources that we've kind of relied on in the past.
Nice. So you write about travel, culture, food, wine, what you found is exciting. And so, some of us are maybe a little nervous about trying these things. I mean, any thoughts about first time travelers, especially maybe overseas? How do you do this with a certain degree of comfort?
Yeah, for me, it's all about planning. And I kind of go to an extreme. My friends and family kind of make fun of me for it. But I do a lot of research in advance, but I never try and corner myself either, because the most pivotal experience with travel is kind of being spontaneous while you're there. Right. But when you do research, learn some of the customs that you should be aware of, or at least a few pieces of the language that will allow you to navigate a little bit better, or learning how the train systems work in advance. Oh my gosh, that has been one that I've learned my lesson by not doing that. And so just little logistics and kind of reading about them and getting other people's take on what to expect, I think is something that kind of eases the nerves when you're going abroad for the first time.
Right. So that's really good advice. So speaking of trips, you've traveled from Southern California to Eastern Washington recently for the Wine Bloggers Conference. And what'd you think of Walla Walla? What's your takeaway? And you find amazing wines that you're like, wow, these are super awesome. I want to taste these again. And what's your takeaway from all this?
Totally. I loved the conference. It was such a fantastic opportunity to network with other people in the industry. The wine was incredible. I really, really enjoyed going to Armstrong Family Wineries. That was one of our tasting room excursions. And so it was really neat to meet the Armstrong family themselves and try some of their wines. The Syrahs in Washington were standouts overall for me personally.
Nice.
I really enjoy kind of the big, bold red wines. Mm-hmm. So that was a highlight. The Force Majeure excursion I went on, that was incredible to learn about their whole process of winemaking. The list could go on, but it was a really valuable experience overall for me.
Well, I'm glad. Are you going to the one down in New Zealand?
Oh, I have yet to decide, but I would love to. Yeah. If I could swing it with work and all that other stuff, I will be there.
Yeah, maybe find a work conference to go to. And
yeah, exactly.
So I want to kind of circle back to, you did a posting recently and you were at the conference, you had a presentation about cheese mm-hmm. platters. And you wrote a piece on your blog about creating amazing cheese platters. And it's coming to the season where we're really kind of becoming hypersensitive, hyper aware to like, okay, we want to entertain, but how can I put together a really amazing cheese platter? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So to reference your first point, at the conference, we got to learn from the cheese twins and try cheeses of Europe as part of one of the sessions. And so that was inspiring, I think, for me. And I kind of took that and ran with it when I created my blog posts. So, I've always been interested in flavor combinations and those sorts of things, and had that in the back of my mind as I did my post, mm-hmm. But also used a couple of their presentation suggestions too. So I think my overall advice and what I talk about in my post is really finding a balance of what you're putting on the board in terms of flavors, textures, colors, and then where you're sourcing your ingredients from too. I think a lot of people tend to just go to the grocery store and buy whatever is on the shelf, and that's a great start. But really reading the labels and understanding where your products are coming from and how they're made is crucial, because if you put quality products out there, that's going to be even more impressive for your guests.
Right. So, yeah, you talked about, you don't want to just put a big old chunk of cheese on a platter and give people a knife to cut away. I mean, you talk about dimension and color and, thinking ahead, like how much do people eat? You got a party, how much cheese am I going to eat? Brad can eat a lot of cheese. You don't want to see him walking around the big old wedge of cheese. So, I mean, I think this is what's really great. And I don't want you to have to spend your time talking all about that posting, but because I want to direct people to that afterwards, but it kind of makes you think a little bit differently.
Definitely. You have to think from the experience of being the end user, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so, when you're at a party and you're all huddled around one little table that has maybe the appetizers on it and that sort of thing, and you have a drink in one hand and maybe you're trying to get a bite off of the cheese platter in another, the last thing you want to do is have to negotiate where you're going to put your drink and how you're going to hold your plate and do both at once and still eat. So make it as easy as possible for people to enjoy what you've put out there. And I think by thinking creatively about it, whether it's crumbling a cheese or cutting it into a unique shape or something like that, or even incorporating the serving utensil of crackers into the display itself, you not only make it visually appealing, but you make it really easy for people to enjoy. And I think that in and of itself makes it memorable for your guests. It's sort of an easy way to impress, if you will.
Well, I think that's the perfect place to take this conversation and say thank you so much, Caitlin Hodges, for talking with us today. I want to make sure that people come to your website and check you out and become a reader. They can probably subscribe to your page and get notifications. That would be awesome. So thank you, Caitlin, for joining us today.
Thanks, Brad.
Caitlin Hodges is a curator of sipsandtips.com, and through her blog, Sips and Tips, that's sips, SIPS-N, the letter N, tips.com, sipsandtips.com. She aims to showcase the unique relationship between culture, food, drink, and inspire readers to experience the world through that lens. You want to know more about Caitlin's blog? Check out our website, sipsandtips.com. I'll post links to our website and contact information on theoryofwine.com blog. Thanks again, Caitlin.
Thanks, Brad. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Hey, wine friends. Thanks for hanging out with us for Theory of Wine podcast, brought to you by a new wine documentary called Wine Diamonds, Uncorking America's Heartland. Now available online at winediamondsfilm.com and wineryboost.com, influence marketing for the wine industry. Thanks for listening, downloading, and sharing us. Find us at theoryofwine.com. See you next time. Cheers, friends.